Well, the Federation of Kenya Employers has called on the Ministry of Labour and the National Assembly to be vigilant on the amendments touching on matters labour. Well, FKA Chief Executive Jacqueline Mugo, who spoke during the 60th anniversary of the Federation in Nakuru, says that numerous amendments have left the business environment unpredictable. Among the amendments the FKA both cited include the introduction of the 1.5% of the basic wage contribution by the employee and an equivalent 1.5% of the basic wage of each employee by the employer towards the National Housing Development Fund.
There are many challenges about this housing fund because even the structure, the governance around it, government is saying that you contribute, but then there's no guarantee that the contributor will get a house because the houses will be allocated following some balloting system. And for workers, they're saying if you work throughout your life and you don't get a house, then maybe you'll be refunded, but there's no incentive offered to the employer. You'll contribute and that's the end of it.
Well, the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, through its embassy in Nairobi, in cooperation with Kenyan Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, sponsored 100 Kenyan women to qualify them for the hospitality and tourism sector under the training program dubbed Empowering 100 Women Future Leaders in the Hospitality Excellence. Well, the three-day event involved the participation of hospitality and tourism trainers as well as experts from the Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management. Well, the aim of this program is to equip the participants with skills necessary to achieve excellence in the hospitality and tourism sectors that has an ever-increasing client expectation.
Which is very good quality, and then they get polished better in terms of presentation when it comes to the final product. We accept the collaboration between Utalii College and the Emirates Academy for Hospitality Management. We want that to be cemented, and I've raised this with the ambassador. We want a serious MOU to be done. We want a serious collaboration. We need a serious exchange program between our teachers and our students. So, Your Excellency, and I recognize all the Arab ambassadors here, Kenya government is committed to work with yourselves and to cement this relationship. So we are ready to join hands, and I want finally to recognize the students who are all here.
As such, the hospitality industry can play a significant role in diversifications of our economies. True women's empowerment is not benevolence. It is rational, economic logic. Both our countries understand that reaching our economies' potential requires the full participation of our workforce, men and women alike.
The college is also the Secretariat for European Hospitality Association, and this is a proud moment for us to connect with the government of UAE and also the Emirates Hospitality Academy.
Well, indeed, some good news there for the hospitality industry. Well, we now want to bring in Ken Gishinga just to analyze some interesting stories that did happen this week. Ken is already with us here in the studio, and he's just making his way onto the set. And great to see you, Ken.
Good to see you, Abdi,
looking
always.
Sharp.
Looking sharper.
Yeah. And Ken, it's been a very interesting week in Khartoum, and of course the protests are still ongoing. And so far, there's a state of limbo in that particular country. But before we go to Sudan, let's come closer home. This week, we did see Kenya Airways, the national carrier, signing codeshare agreements with Delta Airlines in the United States. And they're also looking to tap into the Canadian market. For Kenya Airways, they did start the maiden flight to actually New York, and to some extent, some people say, was this route well thought out?
Well, I think it's a proud moment for Kenya Airways. Obviously, the value proposition is higher because now it connects Nairobi to 11 American cities. Remember, KQ only flies to New York. but with the new code-sharing agreement with Delta, it opens for them 11 cities in America and 4 cities in Canada. So you're right, there was some skepticism around, because especially when they reduced the number of flights. But I saw in today's headlines that they've actually, they're going to return the flights back because the spring season is here and a lot of people will be traveling. So I think as a Kenyan businessman, it's an exciting time because now you're open up to, you can do your meetings in Chicago, in Orlando, in Miami. So I think it can only be a win-win scenario for Kenya.
Interesting. And of course, Ken, looking at where KQ is, this week they've also been appearing in Parliament, where they've been defending their bid to take over the Kenya Aviation Authority. Sorry, Kenya Airports Authority. And the parliamentarians had sort of divided from what we picked, and a majority of them are saying, well, this deal comes at a time when KQ is still not yet out of the woods. They're still not as profitable as they would want to be. They're still in the loss-making territory. But looking at the grounds that have been covered so far, what are the chances of this deal sailing through, and why the interest by KQ to manage Kenya Airports Authority?
I think the chances are pretty slim if you look at the body language in those sessions. And why do I say so? If you look at, for example, the alleged conflicts of interest between maybe the chairman of Kenya Airports Authority, who's also sitting on one of the banks that's funding KQ. Those are the issues that a lot of people want resolved. Then there's the whole issue of the strategy for KQ. It's still not very clear. Yes, they have the KQ flights to New York, but we don't see how they're going to come back into profitability very soon. And it's very unlikely that a loss-making entity can take over profit-making. So for me, I got the sense that the government, KQ is backtracking a bit, but who knows, they might sort of like shift the cards again, and next week we might see a different side. But for me right now, it looks like the chances are pretty slim of that happening. Okay.
And of course, we can only but wait for time. Let's take a recap really, Ken, on what's happening in Sudan. So far, we do understand that civilians are still on the streets. They're saying they're not satisfied by the fact that the military has ousted al-Bashir. They want a government that has a civilian face. Of course, it's a hard nut to crack from where the country is coming from, where they've enjoyed military rule. How are the prospects for Sudan, and how will this tinker with their economic stability?
I think it's going to be very challenging. Why? Because there's a feeling that Sudan needs to embrace more market-oriented policies. Granted that Bashir was not the most popular person, but there's a feeling that now with the military in place, it might even be more dictatorial. One of the challenges about revolutions is sometimes the outcomes that were expected are never the ones that come in. And I'll give an example of Egypt. During the time of Mubarak, there was a feeling that there was never a sense of democracy in Egypt. But the moment Mubarak was removed, we saw the country slipping into chaos for quite a number of years before Al-Sisi came in. So sometimes we have to almost have two trade-offs. Is it stability, or do you want democratic freedoms? And sometimes those two trade-offs play out in ways that are not very obvious to the public until the revolutions happen. Then people start saying, oh, I miss the stability of the past regime. But I think moving forward, I think IGAD, I think the East African community need to weigh in terms of not dictating to Sudan, but helping them walk through what can be a more democratic Sudan. And I think that will be the largest country in Africa.
Sure, a lot of uncertainties still.
And a lot of potential, exactly. So I think it's in the best interest of East African community heads to come together and really help Sudan navigate this difficult period.
All right. And finally, Ken, we know that President Uhuru Kenyatta did visit Mauritius, and one of the key outcomes is Kenya signed a trade deal that will see avocado farmers access that market. How big is this news, especially to the common man who has a plantation of avocados down in Kirinyaga?
I think it's very big news. The biggest market right now has been the EU and China. Avocados to China are becoming the biggest thing among farmers. The fact that Mauritius was able to lift the ban on not just avocado, but a lot of other agricultural produce baby carrots, such things.
Broccoli.
I think it's broccoli. I think it's going to be a fantastic thing for any agribusiness entrepreneur. How long will that take before we get, because sometimes it's done at the presidential level, but at the local agencies, in terms of logistics of getting things there. Our flights, do we have enough flights going into Mauritius to take this to take this produce? Because this produce is perishable.
Sure.
So if you have flights that are going once or twice a week, it doesn't make sense. So does everybody else in the supply chain, has everybody aligned their policies? But I think it's a fantastic move in the right direction. It didn't get the large coverage that I thought it would. If you compare it with the Museveni Kenya state visit, I thought that would got a much bigger thing. But if you look at what Kenya stands to benefit, I think especially for the farmer, it was a good deal.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ken. Of course, a lot to talk about, but limited time.
Any
We
day.
appreciate
Take care.
your input.
Cheers.
Well, that's a quick chit-chat with Ken Gishinga, our resident analyst here on the program. And we now want to leave you with a teaser of what to expect on a trading bell that is coming up after this commercial break, where we'll be talking about something quite interesting that is on matters to do with real estate.